What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode number 47 of My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly, and today we're joined by Partha Unnava. And Partha is an entrepreneur. He founded the company Better Walk, which is around making a crutch that is better for you and that doesn't cause pain in your armpits. But they've since pivoted and they now are known as Lasso. And they're an athletic wear company, but they're merging medicine and athletic wear. And they've produced a sock that reduces the risk of ankle injury by a dramatic amount. And I'm very excited to have him here on the podcast today. And we're going to get into his entrepreneurial journey. We're going to talk about his views on social media, what it was like pivoting from Better Walk to Lasso, meeting and presenting in front of President Barack Obama, and being named one of the Forbes 30 under 30. And before we jump into today's conversation, there's a couple things we need to go over first. Number one, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving a rating and a review. The more ratings and reviews we get, the more it helps people find the podcast, because the more positively the podcast algorithms look upon this podcast. And if you're one of those people that have recently found the podcast, welcome. I'm very excited to have you here. Make sure you subscribe, stay tuned for future episodes. And to everybody listening, make sure you screenshot this, post it to your Instagram story and tag at My Social Life Podcast, and I'll feature you on the account and send you a message as well. Now, without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Partha Unnava. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. Today, we're joined by Partha Unnava, and Partha is the founder of both Better Walk and Lasso. He's also a member of Forbes 30 under 30. He's been invited to the White House by President Obama, and he has over 26,000 Instagram followers. Partha, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jacob.
It's my pleasure. And I want to go all the way back, because if I'm correct, you grew up in Columbus, Ohio, but you ended up going to school at Georgia Tech. So what brought you there?
Yeah, so it was actually just purely their ranking at the program I wanted to be in. So I was really, really passionate about biomedical engineering. I've always wanted to create products that help people move better. And at a young age, it was prosthetic limbs, but it started to change and evolve over time. But Georgia Tech's been number one in biomedical engineering for a while. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me.
That's awesome. And so was starting a company always your long-term goal, or did you kind of go to school with a bit of a different objective?
So the goal initially was to become a doctor. It was just kind of culturally, that's what I thought I was supposed to do with my life. And once I got to college was really the first time I actually asked myself the question of why I was at college and what the purpose of it was. And I realized that a degree didn't really mean anything to me, but the impact of what I could build meant something to me. So when I had an opportunity to really go after that, I went for it.
And the opportunity kind of came when you broke your ankle playing basketball, right? Like that's kind of where the genesis of your first company started?
Correct. So after breaking my ankle, I spent 6 weeks on crutches, and it's terribly uncomfortable. And during that time, I was working on some designs on the side to create a crutch that was more comfortable. And took that through one of my classes at Georgia Tech and spun it out with a couple friends. And over time that evolved. We brought that product to market, saw that we were doing well on e-com, but we saw that the company wasn't going to really get as big as I wanted to build. So we just changed the whole thing over to Lasso.
Okay. And then so I was curious about how you go about finding investors for a company. Like what's that process like? How do you find them? What's the pitch process look like?
Yeah, so these days it's a little bit different. There's a lot of programs you can get into. So I went into an accelerator program in Memphis. Basically what that does is you pitch your idea. They're almost entirely focused on the team. That's really all that matters when you're building something, is how passionate are the founders and what kind of backgrounds do they have that'll help them succeed. And that accelerator program teaches you all the basics of how to build a business, what to look for, what to think about, and they give you some very initial seed funding to at least prove out your concept. So then you can actually approach larger scale investors.
Okay. And so how long were you into your first venture before you were named onto the Forbes 30 under 30?
That was about a year and a half in. And a lot of that, so you've probably seen with your background, just there's very little innovation in sports medicine, and specifically in healthcare. There's a lot in pharmaceuticals, there's a lot in data, but there's very little on the product side. So it's a pretty wide open space, and I'm one of very few young people really innovating in this space.
Okay. So with the process of like being named 30 under 30, like how much did you have to do to be a part of that? How did you get nominated? Like what was that like?
So literally no idea. I just woke up one day and I was on it.
Really? That's it?
Yeah. So it was pretty cool. For me, I've never been a big award person in terms of really going after them. I have a lot of friends who have played that game, but for me, it's never fulfilling when you try to get the award. So for me, it was really just more stick to the mission, try to do things for the right reason, and just have faith that it'll get recognized in the long run. And so far, it has.
That's awesome. So I'm assuming though that even though you aren't necessarily working towards these like awards and stuff, I'm sure a bunch of different opportunities came out of being named one of the 30 under 30.
For sure. And I think beyond anything, it's just a big cosign on you. It's a big stamp of validation that you know what you're doing. You're a thoughtful person and you're for real. You're not trying to scam anybody. You're not trying to play any games. You're really trying to build something.
That's awesome. And I think if I'm not mistaken, you met your co-founder at a 30 under 30 event, right?
So my CFO actually. So I had two original co-founders early with the crutches, and then I met my CFO at 30 under 30, and then over time, as we evolved the company, we really almost refounded the whole thing. It's the same entity, but like for all intents and purposes, we refounded the whole thing with a new team about a year and a half ago to build Lasso.
Okay. And then along the way somewhere, I believe you tried to make, I believe it was with your CFO, a vodka marketed to the LGBTQ market, correct?
Yeah, I did. Where did you see that?
I can't remember. I might have been on another podcast. I can't remember where I saw that, if I'm being completely honest.
That's funny. Yeah. So I have a good friend who was just really, really passionate about doing that. And back then, I don't drink anymore now, but back then, like I loved like that scene, and I was interested in being involved in that world. I love pop culture. I love the cultural world, and I love marketing. So this just seemed like a fun thing to get involved with. So I got a lot of experience in supply chain, and we had put together a small team, and we really had a lot of stuff tied up in terms of being able to launch that, partnerships, et cetera. But the team just didn't have what it took to really commit to it. So we ended up not doing it.
That's fair. And then with all this media attention at a young age, like how were you and the team able to handle all of that?
I think honestly, for me, like a lot of the attention initially just made me get really alienated. Over time, I've started to learn better how to handle it. But I mean, it's not a crazy amount of attention, so it's not crazy difficult to deal with. It's not like I get recognized everywhere, but I think it's been more of a blessing than a curse because it's brought a lot of good inward. But the real big challenge is that you get good and bad, and you get plenty of opportunities that are good, but may not be good for the stage that you're at. And the hardest thing for us has been to differentiate what do we say yes to, what do we say no to. And there's a lot of opportunities that, I mean, it might be your dream, but you have to say no because you're not ready for that yet. So that's been the biggest challenge for us.
And you mentioned how like you're not getting recognized everywhere you go, but has there ever been a time where you have been recognized in public?
For sure, yeah, a couple times, but it's mostly, and I think it's different when you're in business versus like if I was a musician or something, it'd be a totally different tone. So if I get recognized in public, it'll be like, hey, like I like what you're doing, and that's just a very friendly thing. And it's the same way if I saw somebody else that have been, say, following their journey and building a company. If I saw them, I'd be like, hey, I really like what you're building. I appreciate you doing it. So it's not, there's no fandom around me by any means.
That's fair. And I'm sure everybody asks this questions, but I have to have to know what it was like to be invited to the White House to present for Obama.
It was cool. He's a really cool guy. He was very laid back. Even that was like totally random. I applied just because I saw it on their site. And I just didn't think anything of it. And there was no mention that he would even be there. It was just supposed to be at the White House, which I thought would be really cool because I'd never been there. When we did our 8th grade trip, it was still closed for tours and all of that. So I'd never seen the White House. I was like, this would be fun. And when I got there, they had me go like in a completely different area than everyone else that was exhibiting. I was like, well, this sucks. Like nobody who's coming here is going to see anything that I've worked on. Like I'm in this back alley behind 2 other layers of security, and it didn't click till I saw him walk outside. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. This is way better.
That's awesome. So like how much time did you have with them?
It was just a few minutes, just like 3 or 4 minutes. But we got to talk just about what I was building, what the goal was, and just kind of about student entrepreneurship. But it was just a cool experience for me.
And like I went all the way back, and the first photo on your Instagram right now is a photo of you and Obama taken from like a distance. So is that the only photo you have of you two together, or was there some other stuff you got?
Oh no, I have some closer ones. They're not on my Instagram. I think it's on my Twitter as the header. May not be anymore. Used to be the header picture on my Twitter, but um, I don't know if it's like the coolest thing to just be putting that thing everywhere.
That's fair. And then so you talked about how you've recently kind of relaunched Better Walk as Lasso, and I read your article about like that year period in your life where it kind of went from like the worst year of your life to the best year of your life. So how did that kind of, what was that transition from one of the worst years to one of the best years? Like how did you kind of turn things around?
It was hard. I think I definitely have had my ups and downs on this journey, and the ups have always felt more like just finally like peacefulness, like not up, but like normal. And the downs have felt like, oh my gosh, this thing is falling apart. So it's tough. I think one of the things that's helped a lot. I've started to go to yoga very consistently with my girlfriend, and we've started doing meditation classes, and that's been huge for my psyche and just in terms of keeping perspective too. But it's just one of those things where all of this stuff that you feel like you can't handle, you usually can, and you just have to keep on moving forward. And at the end of the day, you're going to look back on it and be thankful that you had the experience, but also pray that you'll never go through that again.
And then like I've heard you talk about the importance of physical and mental health and fitness. So like how often are you meditating and doing yoga and stuff like that?
So I do something almost every day. Meditation, I'll do a formal meditation class a couple times a week, once or twice. But I try to grab at least, if it's only a minute, it's only a minute. But just some downtime to just focus on breathing in the morning or just to try to settle myself before the day starts. Um, and then yoga wise, it's really like anywhere from 3 to 5 times in the week. Just I switch between that and lifting. So it just depends on what my fitness goals are at that time.
Okay, that's fair. Is there anything else you're doing in terms of like mental fitness? Like do you do journaling or anything like that?
Yeah, I journal every morning, and it's a practice called morning pages, but it's like 3 pages every morning, um, just about whatever. So it's like kind of a first thing after I wake up, I write, and it helps just in terms of getting your head completely clear to start the day.
That's awesome. And then so you talked about your girlfriend, how you're doing yoga with your girlfriend. I just want to talk to you about the idea of how important it is to surround yourself with good people. And I've heard you talk about the concept of you're the product of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most.
Yeah, for sure. Um, it's really funny. So at first, when I started doing this entrepreneurship thing, I met so many people, and then over time, I still have a lot of people that I would consider good friends that I don't talk to very often, but um, all of those people really have the same values, and that's been a really cool thing to see. Is everyone really they all are fit. They all care about mental health. They all care about things like journaling. They're all wildly creative in their own fields. So just to be around people that all share those same values has been really good for me in terms of growth. And I mean, especially with my significant other, to have somebody whose own habits push me to make mine better has been a huge benefit just in terms of keeping my head in the right place, staying organized, and getting more productive too.
And one thing that you talked about kind of along the lines of this, I think it was in your TEDx talk where you were saying how when you first came along this concept of you're the product of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most, you started using hip hop as a way to kind of surround yourself with people that are all chasing the same thing as you.
For sure. The one thing I would have to caveat that with is if you listen to anything that J. Cole put out from like 2009 to 2017, it's like the most inspiring, relatable stuff. Same with Drake, you know. But one of my issues these days with music is I don't really find that level of storytelling, and maybe it's a symptom of people going through a lot more stuff and the impact of social media on our psyches and all of that. But it's definitely harder to pull the values that I care about from music these days than it used to be. So rather than focus so much on hip hop these days, I'm focused a lot more on the friends that I've made over the last several years.
But I'm assuming that hip hop then was a big part of your life growing up.
For sure, and it still is. I still have to look every Friday to see what songs came out.
So like who are some of your favorites? I know you mentioned J. Cole and Drake. Is there anyone else?
Of course, Kendrick. I mean, literally, like I'm across the board in my interest. So like in the new generation, I'm a huge fan of Denzel Curry. He's just got a really interesting take on hip hop. I'm a huge fan of Brockhampton. They're like a group of like 15 kids from, I think they're on the West Coast. They just make such interesting stuff. So I really like where those guys are at. But then my heart will always be with J. Cole, Drake, Kendrick, and that generation.
That's awesome. And one other thing I wanted to ask you about during that year period there was you stopped wearing suits. Can you kind of explain why?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when you start a company, and or really, I think when you start working, you're expected to be a certain thing. And I think that one of the biggest frustrations for me in life was being put into a box, being told who I was, and I never ever wanted to be in a situation where I didn't feel like myself. So when I started the company, I was always trying to fit in, and fitting in was good at the beginning because it let me kind of learn what was going on and understand how the industry worked. But it also made me, I mean, just so quiet, so minimal of a presence in that industry and in that space, and started to realize that personality and influence and all of that, it comes from really standing up for what you believe in. So um, it's the no's that dictate who you are and build up who you are as a person. When somebody hears you say no, it lets them know what you stand for. But when you say yes, you're not really communicating any information about who you are or what you believe in. You're just doing something. So yes is a lot less powerful than the word no. So then I started to realize that the no's where I would decide what I cared about and who I was and how I wanted to look and how I wanted to dress and all of that. Like in high school, I wore shorts, like athletic shorts, every single day. It is just what I did. I've just always been into that stuff. So it was one of those things where I was like, why am I wearing suits all the time? Just because I'm seeing people around me wear it. But it was kind of two things. It was one, maybe I'm not in the right community for me to excel in business. And number two, is this even who I am? So it took a lot of soul searching, but dropping the suits, wearing a lot more sweats, wearing a lot more athletic clothes, like really not caring what I'm wearing, and then finding a community of people to do business with that also share those values, where it's more about what you bring to the table than what you are dressed like. That means a lot. And that doesn't mean I don't care about grooming myself or anything, but I just think that I should wear comfortable clothes because we all go to the gym every day. Why not just wear those clothes till we get to the gym?
And with that in mind, I kind of want to pivot now and talk about Lasso. So can you explain what that is and where that idea came from?
Yeah, for sure. So we are the first medical sports brand, and what that means is we took a lot of the science behind medical taping and we applied it to a sock. What that does is it uses compression to mimic having your joint supported by tape. It helps with improving your coordination, with your balance, with proprioception, which is basically your body's awareness of where your foot is at any given time. And one of the biggest impacts is it provides a ton of joint support. So the technology we created is really unique in the market, and we really operate as a hybrid behind medical and sports. So we really care about branding. We really care about how things come across, and we think that you can't bring new technology to the market unless it's marketed in a culturally forward way. So that's a really big thing for us is the whole aesthetic of everything we touch has to be culturally forward. But at the same time, it has to be backed by science and thoughtfully created and designed. And I think we excel in both areas. So that was the vision there is to not only win on the marketing side, but also to be the best on the science side.
Can you kind of explain what you mean by being culturally forward?
Yeah, so it's understanding what's cool at any given time, visually, aesthetically, sonically, um, and understanding who to work with and how to get a product out into the world. So we, from a basketball standpoint, we haven't worked with any NBA players in huge depth, but we have a streetball player that we work with who has a large Instagram presence, who a ton of kids follow, and that just made more sense to us because he is exactly what we stand for from a value standpoint. He's kind of a rebel. He does his own thing. His name's Bone Collector. He was like not on the and one street ball tour, but built his own presence and rep through this whole time, was homeless for a huge part of it. Like really, really fantastic story. And to see a guy who's persevered through all of that, who really stands for what we believe in, which is move with confidence. Plus, he's a good guy. He takes care of his community. He's really, really involved with the kids. Just a stand-up guy, and he's ridiculous at basketball. Like I don't know if you saw in the last couple of days, but he just really crossed over Floyd Mayweather this past week.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
did see that.
yeah, he can play. So to find people like that who have a cultural impact that is extremely um, just undervalued in terms of what they do for us as a community and a culture, we love being involved with people like that. So that's what I mean by culturally forward.
That's awesome. And so this obviously isn't your first company that you've been growing. So how has it differed from growing Lasso to your previous ventures?
I think just got a lot of mistakes out of the way the first time around. So this time we're a lot more efficient. We're going slower, and I think that's a good thing. We've achieved still a very fast rate of growth, but we're moving slower. We're taking on a lot less, and we're being a lot more decisive about what we do and what we don't do. And the tough part of that is you get a lot of people who are very passionate about what you're doing, who want to help, but it's very hard to communicate, hey, I appreciate your energy, but if we took on that project, if we took on this new direction, yes, we're going to get there eventually. But if we took it on now, we wouldn't even make it to any of the places we want to go. That's a tough thing for us to express to people, but that's the biggest change is we're being more deliberate and patient.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I feel like people have a difficult time with is admitting when it's time to pivot to a new idea. So how was that for you, pivoting from Better Walk to Lasso?
That surprisingly wasn't too hard because I'm more driven by where we're going than how we get there. So I don't care what the product is. I don't care about really any of the details. I just care about making that impact. And with Lasso, it's cool to see that we're changing a paradigm in treating an ankle injury or preventing an ankle injury. And we hope to do a lot more than that in the future. But that was the goal since day one, was to make a measurable impact in healthcare that moved technology forward and changed the way people treat injuries and injury prevention. And we're doing that now, which is great. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And you have your product being used by multiple pro athletes. Like you talk about Bone Collector, but you also have some athletes, I think in the NFL that use your stuff as well.
A ton. NFL, NBA, MLB, MLS, you name it. So we've got hundreds of athletes that use it in the Olympics coming up too. So it's been cool to see the product really pick up that quickly. But for us, it's really seeing that traction, first of all, allows us to work on more products, which is going to be exciting in the future. But before we even get there, it's cool. We know we have something that works, finding the right way to communicate that to the rest of the world.
And you talk about more products. I saw on the Lasso Instagram that you used to have like sweaters and stuff, but when I went on the website now, it's only just the socks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we've tried like little bits of apparel here and there. We'll probably do some more in the future. We have something coming with Bone Collectors. It's a T-shirt. It's going to be pretty cool. But beyond that, with the compression technology, is more where I'm focused. So we're bringing that same support to different parts of the body in the coming months, which will be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And wanted to ask you, you got the Lasso logo tattooed on your forearm. Why did you do that?
It was we crossed the revenue milestone. That was big for me. So that's one. But the second one is really because there's some symbolism behind the logo. First, it symbolizes balance. So it's actually based on a load line, which is on the side of a ship. And that is when you put weight on the boat, it goes deeper in the water. When the water level is at that symbol on the side of a boat, that's as much weight as it can take. So it's a pretty cool symbol that's been used for, hey, this is how much it can take and still be stable. And our products make you more stable. But it's also the shape of a half court, center court in basketball. And the whole thing started when I hurt my ankle. So it just felt like a good symbol to symbolize this whole journey for me. And I also really wanted anybody I knew when I shook their hand, whether I'm wearing a T-shirt or whatever, to just get an immediate idea of my personality.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, if you'd never broken your ankle, where do you think you'd be right now?
I think I would probably still have started some sort of venture because I was thinking about this yesterday actually because I was talking about somebody who I'd gone to high school with who ended up going to a different university, and I probably would have gone down that medical path is what I was thinking, but I really don't think that I could have made it very far down that just because my personality is not conducive to it. So I'd probably still be working on something. But who knows? My passion's always been like what was prosthetic limbs changed into ways to improve our body's motion through garments. So my passion's always going to be in understanding how the body moves and making it move better, and then designing products that people can interact with that really heighten that experience.
And did you finish school? You ended up dropping out a little bit early, right?
Yeah, I dropped out at year 3.
Okay, so kind of looking back on your whole journey, like I feel like the hot debate right now is school worth it for entrepreneurs? And I'm curious to know your opinion.
So I actually learned a lot of technical knowledge at school. When I dropped out, I only had electives left, so I had more or less completed my degree. So I didn't really have much interest in staying and finishing that. I think that it depends on what you want to do as an entrepreneur and how much you can hold yourself accountable for actually learning things in your free time. Because for me, having those years of really dedicated study, I did pick up a lot of science that I use every day, and that's been a huge blessing. And a lot of different things with engineering and manufacturing that I use every day. But without that understanding, I couldn't have built this company. So it was useful for me, but the degree doesn't matter at all. It was actually the knowledge that's useful for me and the way in which it was taught to me.
I kind of assume that'd be where your answer would go because you learned so much at school that helped you build your product. And I heard you talk about one time that the difference between being product focused versus marketing focused. And over time, founders become less and less involved with the product and more so the marketing. So how important is it for you to stay a part of developing the products for your company?
That's super funny because I've just been going through those thoughts. So I've definitely been very marketing heavy over the last year or so, but I've actually started to shift my role more into helping bring these products out to market faster because we have a lot of technology that's already developed that we just have to make sure we manufacture it properly and then get it out to consumers. So I have an amazing team that is killing it on the marketing side and the sales side. So it's given me the room to actually get back to that product focus. And that's where I think my head always has to be.
And why do you think that? Like, why do you think you couldn't have other people working on the product? Like, what's your reasoning behind that?
Oh, it's that's a tough one because I'm gonna come across really, really, really egotistical. But I just don't believe that there's anybody I could hire that could do it.
That's fair though, man. Like, I completely understand that. But when it comes to marketing, another thing that in that article you put up on your Medium was there's one line that caught my eye and it says our digital ads started working. So what kind of ads were you running at the time that started to work for Lasso?
So we did really well on Facebook. It's really just explaining how the product works. One of the interesting things with having a new technology that nobody's ever seen is that you don't have to convince them on anything. You just have to explain to them how it works, and then that market will find you. So that's what we were doing is we were exposing like a video explaining how the product works to many, many different segments of the marketplace, and we started to see where our sweet spots were and further refine that process and start to gather more data, understand who our customers were, start messaging more directly to them, figuring out what sports they played, et cetera.
And so when you say you were messaging a bunch of different segments, like can you ballpark how many different segments you were trying with your messaging?
Oh, literally everybody. So in terms of like the granularity of it, we had, say, the whole U.S. population broken down into sports, into age groups, into genders, into whether they were parents or not, into where they lived, and all the way down to what hour of the day they were exposed to an advertisement. Because if you see something at work, it's different than if you see it at home.
That's crazy. So how long were you running the ads before they really started to quote unquote like to work? Because I feel like a lot of people will try Facebook ads for like a month or so and be like, well, these don't really work for us and give up. But it takes so long to do the testing like what you've done in order for them to really start working. So I'm just curious how long that process was for you.
It was 6 months till we got an inkling of hope, and then 3 more months till it scaled.
Wow. And then so I want to talk about your Instagram as well. You're currently like with the Lasso Gear Instagram, you're at like over 10,000 followers. So how are you able to grow that account?
So we boost posts here and there, and it's just been a lot of the content that's relevant, but also we get a lot of shout outs on Instagram. A lot of people who get the product will tag it and post it. So that's been another way.
It's awesome. And so when you say like you boost posts every once in a while, how do you determine which ones you're kind of putting some spend behind?
So that's not going to be my area of expertise, but the logic behind it is basically where there's the most organic interaction and which ones coincide with our ad spend efforts. So it's like if we're running a bunch of baseball ads and we've put up some baseball posts, and this one is doing the best, we're going to give that a little extra push there.
So are you involved much with the Instagram strategy or anything for Lasso? Or are you more so now, like you said, on the product side?
No, I oversee, so my role is primarily on the fundraising side, finance, and then managing the team. But from a day-to-day standpoint, I'm not involved at all. So I make sure that the machine runs.
Okay. So then basically with your own personal Instagram, how are you able to grow that one to over 26,000 followers? Like anything that you did specifically to get there?
I did a lot of speaking over the last few years, and I've really like these days I've dialed back on a lot of stuff, and I'm like barely posting or doing any of that. And I've archived a lot of posts too, so I used to post very often, but um, I don't know. It's just one of those things where it was cool to build it, but at the end of the day, it didn't really do anything for me. So I sort of started to shy away from it.
So when you say that what didn't really do anything for you, like you mean like in terms of like results for the business or just kind of on a personal level?
For the business and personally, it didn't make me happy. It didn't really make me feel anything. So it was just like a lot of work I was putting in for no reason. And from a speaking standpoint, one of the goals was to do more public speaking for me. And it just was easier to just have somebody reach out. Um, the Instagram following wasn't really a factor. I think like I hit the minimum threshold where they're like, cool, like this guy can at least like know what he's talking about to some extent, but that's about it.
Okay. So like growing your Instagram was mainly like, was it mainly a way for you to try and get speaking engagements at the end of the day? Like, was that kind of the intention behind growing it?
Yeah, more or less. Because like in my world, it's really not dependent on how many followers I have, how successful our business is. It's not. It doesn't really get affected by my persona in too great of an extent. Um, these days, we're actually going to be launching some content soon. We have a podcast coming out with some pro athletes, so that will probably bring some followers and stuff. But again, it's just not super relevant what my persona is. It's more the company. Like mine, definitely. Like I want to carry myself a certain way. I want to stand for the values of the company, but I don't really think it matters how many people follow me. It's just if you follow me, you need to understand what I'm about.
Okay. That's interesting because I feel like some people like will try to grow their personal brands that their companies benefit, but you're more so just focused wholly on the company, which is super interesting. So with that podcast, then are you going to be involved with it in any way? Or are you again just going to kind of be like from a higher level overseeing everything?
So I host that podcast. So that's one of the ones where I'm involved, and I think you, it's different because so this year I've moved out to LA, and I like it, but one of the interesting things about LA is that it's pretty easy like to get access to a lot of stuff. Well, it has been with my network. So following doesn't matter because every room I'm walking in, everyone has 500,000 or a million or what, like it doesn't matter. But if I get in the room, that was the whole point. So adding more followers isn't going to make it easier for me to get into certain rooms to talk to different people about either an investment or working together or a partnership or something like that's really not the goal anymore. So since we have the access, we have a great advisory network, great investor network, really helps me talk to whoever I need to talk to. Then it's like, cool, that hurdle is gone. I don't need someone to open the doors anymore because I have people doing that. And that's what the Instagram primarily was for, was really opening doors and creating these opportunities. But um, now having people on the team who have real life clout, I don't need to really worry about it for myself.
So do you have any advice for people listening, how they can kind of work on growing their network and gaining access to these different kinds of people?
I think people are really receptive. If you're working on something for the right reasons that's interesting, you reach out to people who are in that industry, who are leaders in that industry, and they find it interesting, they'll be down to help. That's what I've experienced is that when you find people who have a passion for what you're doing and you're both going toward the same direction, there's always a way to work together.
That's awesome. And then so I was going to ask you about your other social media, but I guess if you're not really focused on your Instagram, you're not really focused on any of the other platforms either then, right?
No, not at all.
Do you think there will ever be a point down the road where you start to kind of make content around all the things you've learned and stuff across your entrepreneurial journey?
I was thinking about that actually. Maybe. It's a really strong maybe, because I think that would be the first thing to get cut if my life got busier. So it's not something I want to start if I know that I'm going to quit in like 2 months, 3 months. So we'll see.
That's fair. But now kind of pivoting from not your Instagram, but I saw on your LinkedIn that you're the creative director for your friend's Instagram. Is that something that you're still doing?
It's like totally a joke. I also don't take LinkedIn very seriously. So I just like to mess around on there. But I take a lot of photos for him, and I was just messing with him one day. And I was like, look, I'm going to put this on my LinkedIn. And then I had one of our mutual friends, who's my director of marketing, write a recommendation for me that it like changed his whole Instagram. So that totally just a joke.
Okay. So, but you were actually taking the photos for him?
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like getting a couple shots. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but like, has photography always been something that you're interested in? Like, was that something you've always been doing? Is that why he came to you and you volunteered to do it, or what's the story behind that?
No, we're just really good buddies. So, like, I'm gonna call him out because I can. But I definitely take better photos than him. So it was just one of those things where I was making fun of him because I asked him to take a photo of me, and I like framed it for him, and he took it and it was at a weird angle, even though I had set it all up, and I was very frustrated. I was like, "What are you doing?" And I took his, and it looked a lot better. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna be your creative director from now on. Don't touch mine. So it was just one of those things.
That's hilarious. But I also saw, like, back to your LinkedIn, that you're an advisor for a couple different companies. So how did that kind of come about?
So I started doing a little advisory work here and there. Most of it started just because of good friends that I wanted to help. So just finding ways that I could help them. And really, I found that the best advisors don't tell you what to do, but they ask you the right questions. So that's what I've always been driven to do. And I've advised a couple companies here and there. Recently, I've pulled back a lot, and I'm mostly just focused on my own stuff. I might pick up a new company here or there, but it's just been something that so when I started building the company in Memphis, they had this motto, and it's called reach while you climb. So they tell you to help somebody for every step up you take, help somebody else take that previous step you took. So it's just been something I try to stick close to and try to give back as much as possible.
That's really interesting. So it was like, what are some other key learnings you kind of took from that early stage in your entrepreneurial journey when you were with that, with the incubator?
Really, I mean, the big thing that I learned was early on, I was the most like out there networker, even though I was very, very shy, and it paid off in a huge way because I have a lot of great relationships still. I was just back in Memphis last week, and it was just cool I was hanging out with somebody I had known since my first day in the program, and it was just cool to still have that friendship. So um, for me, like one of the strongest foundations that I built there was that those relationships really do make a difference. And out of my cohort, our company, I believe, is the only one that's still running. And for me, at least, it's the only one that the founding team is still on board. Because I think there's one that got a new management team. But at the end of the day, I learned that it's really all about persistence and how much work you put into the thing, and really wanting to make something happen, and going about that for the right reason. So not just like, it's not just about making money. There's a lot of ways to make money, and building a company is not the best way to do that. So especially an impact based company in the healthcare space, not the best way to make money. Especially if you just want to do that, you should go to Wall Street. So at the end of the day, it's really just about that pure will, and doing it for the right reason that gets you from A to B. That was something I saw early, and it really stuck with me.
That's really interesting. Kind of that thought that starting a company is not a great way to make money. And I feel like nowadays entrepreneurship is kind of just this like a trendy thing that everyone wants to do. So like, what are your advice to people that are wanting to start getting into entrepreneurship?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's like trade school. entrepreneurship is a trade. So is music production. So is painting. So is acting. So you need to treat it like a trade. You have to find people who are experts. You have to spend time with them. You have to get one of them to take you on as their basically like their apprentice and um, learn. One of my friends that I reconnected with recently, he has a mentor that he met at his previous job, and he had been learning from his mentor for a couple of years. The mentor asked him to quit his job and work for him, and he is literally for like full time, getting paid to do it, learning from his mentor every single day, everything about how this guy's businesses were built, all the stories behind it, everything he learned, and he's helping run these things. So he's getting the chance to make his own mistakes, but he's also getting the guidance of someone who's really great at what they do. And that is the model of apprenticeship that we've had for thousands of years, but it's really the only way to learn a unique skill. Um, if you're not trying to get a job and you're trying to do something that is more of a learned skill like that, you just have to treat it like an apprenticeship.
That's really interesting. I've never really heard it kind of explained in that exact light, but changing gears a little bit here, like how important would you say social media is to the growth of your company?
So for us, it's huge. It's like the best way we have to interact with people. And it's all of our advertising more or less runs through social media. So it's pretty critical for us. Me personally, not as important these days, but for the company for sure.
So I kind of want to pick your brain on a couple different social trends. Is that cool?
Yeah, for sure.
So I was just curious, like where you kind of land on with social media being bad for our mental health. Like you personally have kind of scaled back your usage of it. Like where do you land on that?
Yeah, I think it is for sure. It's, I mean, it's engineered to be addictive, and that's just that's how it had to be built to be used and to gain users and to keep retention. That's the whole point of it. So it can't be good for you.
One thing that Instagram's doing, at least up here in Canada right now, to kind of combat that a little bit, is they've removed likes from the platform entirely, and they're testing that out up here. Do you think that's like a shift they should make kind of platform wide across the world, or what do you think about that?
That's interesting. Um, did you try it?
Oh, like I didn't have an option. Like I just woke up one day and my likes were gone.
What was that like?
It was okay. Like I don't really like it doesn't affect me at the end of the day. Like I have noticed just like from like a because I have a business account, so I can still see my likes. I don't know if you can with a personal account or not. Like I can see my personal ones, but I can't see anybody else's. And I have noticed that just like from a whole, my likes have gone down since that shift, like have dramatically decreased. So I don't know if people are liking less now that you can't see it, but it's just really interesting to kind of see. I have to talk about more people that have had that change because on the podcast, it's primarily people that are living down in the States, so they don't have that yet. But from my perspective, like I don't think it's a big deal to have that happen. And if it's a positive thing, then I'm cool with it.
Interesting. Social media primarily works because when we share something as humans, we get a dopamine release. And with likes and stuff, there's a dopamine release. So that's how they pull us into the platforms. And it's not necessarily unethical because when we interact with somebody, we get the same dopamine release. If I told you something I read in the news, I would get the same dopamine release as if I shared it on Facebook, maybe a little more on Facebook if I get a bunch of likes for it. But I think that they're a good extension in terms of being able to connect people, and they're the best way we have so far. So I'm a fan of them, but for me, I definitely, especially as I'm getting older each year, I find myself straying away from them more and more unless I need to reconnect with somebody who is distant.
Do you think that Snapchat is dying?
So I don't even have Snapchat. I haven't had it for 5 years.
Really?
Yeah, I just don't like the platform.
That's fair. Are there any trends that you're kind of keeping an eye on right now in the social space?
Yeah, it's really different. I'm a big fan of YouTube. I really like YouTube as a way for information to be shared, as a way to build audiences and communities. So I've just been observing a lot of what people are doing on that platform. We do a decent amount of content, so just to understand that is pretty interesting. My team has been pushing toward IGTV more recently than than YouTube, but personally, I just enjoy using YouTube more than Instagram.
There's a couple things I want to ask you about there. Like first, IGTV, are you guys seeing like positive results from that? And that's why you're pushing? What's the thought process behind that?
Yeah, what we found is that recently we've gotten better engagement on IGTV than in other paths of posting content. So whether that's where our audience primarily likes to consume their content, or whether it's because you can put up a post and link it to that, I'm not entirely sure, but we have seen better results there. And then uh, our team also believes that Instagram is really going to be a key platform moving forward, where almost all communication will happen and consumption of content. So we're really looking to build that out as a full window into our brand and what we're about.
That's interesting. So you guys foresee Instagram not going anywhere anytime soon then?
Yeah, we really like the platform.
That's interesting. But I want to kind of go back to your YouTube consumption. Who do you typically watch when you're on YouTube?
I am so all over the place. Half of it is NBA highlights. The other half is like weird conspiracy theories, and then sometimes I'll just check out like random like there's a guy named Graham Stephen who does like real estate investing, and like I really like watching his breakdowns on different deals he does, or what, like educational, I guess. So I'm all over the place.
That's fair. So do you usually do you go through the subscription feed, or you just kind of through the recommended on YouTube?
I go through the recommended.
That's awesome. Is there anything in culture that you're kind of keeping an eye on right now? I know you said that that's like a big part of your company. So are there things you're kind of watching in culture right now that really have your attention?
Yeah, so I'm really intrigued by what's going on with the Gen Z and basically like their love of designer brands and like just branded products, um, combined with like there's a coolness with sustainability that's emerging, which I find really interesting. So really more on what this next generation finds cool. I think that's what I find intriguing right now, and the why as to why they find it cool, especially like looking at. I was just watching. There's a new video for Old Town Road, that song, and it's now, instead of just Lil Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus, they added Young Thug and this kid.
Mason.
Mason. Yeah, I think that's the yodeling kid, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, cool. So that was really interesting to me because they took something in music which was already kind of a meme, and they turned it all the way into a meme. And for that formula to work so well, that was really interesting to me because it looks like kind of everything is turning into a meme these days. So that's kind of what I'm keeping my eye on, is how people interact with content, what's cool, what's not cool, and are these like worlds like music and basketball or football or sports or whatever, and like internet culture, like are they now all merging into just one thing? So that's what I'm interested by.
With that in mind, like with everything kind of merging together, do you think that athletes could do a better job of really kind of rounding out their personal brands online? I just feel like we don't hear enough from pro athletes, especially when they're playing like up their outside interests. Like recently, the other day, I stumbled upon this MLB player who's also like a Twitch streamer. I thought that was like the craziest thing because you don't see that very often. Like, do you think guys could do a better job at really kind of having a more holistic view of who they are, like with their personal brands?
Yeah, so a lot of NFL players have started vlogging. NBA players have been vlogging for like 8 years. There's Juju Smith-Schuster, who plays for Pittsburgh. He's really big on Fortnite, actually, and he was one of the guys when Drake played with Ninja. He was on that stream too, and Travis Scott was as well. So that's cool to see athletes like crossing over into esports, but at the same time, especially if you're an NBA or an NFL athlete, there's no reason for you to, especially with the contract sizes. You're set for life after 5 years in the league.
That's fair. But I was just curious, like, what's next for you, man? What do you got coming up?
Personally, just really just working to zen out a little bit. Work-wise, we're really pushing some new products. This summer, we're taking to really get a lot more reorganized and get ready for a big push in the fall. And we have a new site brand, like a light rebrand coming out in the next few weeks here on the site. I'm trying to think what else. This podcast is coming out soon. It's called The Off Season. It's going to be pretty cool. And then What else? I mean, really just continue growing, launch new products, and we have a few things in the works too, partnership wise, that should be done by the end of the year. So those will be cool once those come out.
That's awesome. And with that podcast, like what was the intention behind you guys bringing on your own podcast for your product?
I just wanted to give athletes that we knew a space to just talk about whatever they wanted.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. But like, how come you're launching it and coinciding with your product? Is that just basically like to raise awareness and attention for the product, but by not being like right directly like down people's throats with like selling the product?
So we're not necessarily large enough yet that if we announce a podcast or drop a podcast, it's gonna like send waves rippling through the sports world. So the timing doesn't necessarily matter as much, but we're just rolling all these things out as they get ready to build a good base of cultural value for our company to show like, hey, we're contributing into this culture scape.
That's awesome. So what are some like long-term goals for you personally?
I just really build this thing. For me, the biggest goal is to help really change what healthcare looks and feels like. So I think that medical sucks. Like using an ankle brace sucks. It's a terrible experience. Same with tape. If I can build this company into something, we can build this company into something that really changes how people feel about healthcare, where this next generation of kids will be very excited to put on their joint support products because they're the coolest things on the market, because all their athletes they follow wear them, because everyone that they like on Instagram wears them. If we can get that level of cultural relevance and pull for a medical product, that's when I'll feel like we've really done something important. So that's a big goal for me, is to change health culture in the US.
That's awesome, man. But I usually wrap up each interview with the same kind of standard questions. And the first one being, if you were going to dinner and you could take 3 people, who would you take?
Do they have to be alive?
No, it could be anybody from any point in time, dead or alive.
Da Vinci is one. LeBron is 2. And let's see. Give me 1 second on this third one. Probably. Oh God, this is really tough.
It's tough too, because like a lot of people's default, like, oh no, is like Obama. But like, I mean, like you've already done that.
Yeah, I would hang out with him again. But if I could pick 3 people, see, the thing is, because we can go across history, really opens up the playing field a lot for people you wouldn't really think of.
That's fair.
Cleopatra.
Okay, that's probably the most like diverse and interesting group of people that I think anyone's ever answered to that question with.
It would be bizarre.
Yeah, definitely. But what's the best advice that you've ever gotten?
I think just to keep moving. I've got a lot of pieces of advice, but a lot of people really kind of say the same thing, which is that no matter what's going on, no matter how you feel, whether you had up or down, you don't really need to do anything other than just take another step forward. And those problems are not as big as you think they are. They're usually just, a lot of them just kind of go away on their own. And if they don't, you can usually solve them. But in the moment, things feel a lot worse than they are. And we have the sense to panic. But the best way to avoid that panic is just move on to the next thing. Rather than worrying about missing a basketball shot, just move on to the next play. So that's been a big one for me.
I like that. But when your alarm goes off in the morning, what motivates you to get out of bed and crush the day?
It's at this point, it's routines. It's just habit. So I don't believe in motivation on a daily basis. I think motivation only lasts for like a few days. But in those days that it lasts, can you set up habits that you'll stick to?
That's really interesting. I've never really heard anybody say like motivation doesn't really last. But what's one thing about you people wouldn't expect?
I am a huge fan of jazz.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I played the trumpet my whole life, and actually toured playing jazz after high school.
Wow,
that summer.
That's awesome. One other thing I was curious about: are you a Cavs fan or a Hawks fan?
Neither. Just a player fan.
Okay. Anybody specific, like a LeBron?
LeBron for sure, because he's from Ohio. D Wade has always been one of my guys, and right now huge James Harden fan. I just love how he scores, and I've talked to guys and um, different guys across the league will be like, I don't understand how he scores so often, like even his competition. So that it's just cool to see that level of excellence. Um, Russell Westbrook, D'Angelo Russell, I think he's crazy good, and he's only 23.
So I'm assuming you're stoked that Russ and Harden are back together now in Houston.
It's gonna be fun. I think it'll be a good year too because I don't know Russ personally, but I know that when he gets fired up, he really has like historically shown huge improvements in his game in different areas. And he got criticized for his assist numbers this past year, so he was already going to be focused on that. And for all of this to go down and him to be with Harden, where Harden's just such a prolific, once in a generation scorer, it's just one of those things where I think he's gonna come in with a chip on his shoulder and just be one of the assist leaders for the league next year. So I can't wait to see that.
That's awesome. What's one thing that everyone needs to know?
That's a really tough question. Just in general about anything,
Yeah.
it's not that bad. Like whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking about, it's just not that bad.
And like, why do you say that?
Because it feels bad. Everything feels overwhelming. It feels stressful. It feels bad. But if you look back later, it's not that bad. So whatever you're going through, whatever you're feeling, if you're feeling any negative thoughts or dark times or whatever you're going through, it's just not that bad. Like one of the tricks that I learned a while back was if you feel upset about something, instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, that person is so annoying," or "Oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming," you just have to add the words "and I love it" to the end of that. So that person is so annoying and I love it, or this is so overwhelming and I love it. Just lets you take a completely different attitude to the same situation.
That's interesting. I definitely think I'm going to try that going forward now.
It helps, definitely.
But for the last question, I kind of like to flip the script a little bit. Like, what's one question that if you can know the answer to about, like, you would want to know the answer to about anything?
Oh, that's a tough one too. For me, it's probably just something more existential. Just what I don't want to know what happens after I die because that might affect my motivation. Um, but maybe just something along the lines of how the universe started.
Awesome, man. I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast, and I want to give you the floor. Like, plug everything and anything you got right now. Where can the people find you?
Appreciate it. So the website is www.lassogear.com, LASSOGEAR.com, and it's at Lasso Gear on all social medias. Mine is Partha Unnava. It's a little hard. If you go to officialpartha.com, all the links are on there.
Awesome, man. I want to thank you once again for coming on the podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode, whether they've listened the entire way through, you've only listened to bits and pieces. I really appreciate you taking the time to check this out. Guys, do me a favor, go and check out Lasso, go and follow Partha. I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below. And if you'd like to follow me, come and say hi. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at the Jacob Kelly. And if you'd like to follow the podcast, just search up My Social Life and it will come up. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.